You're the nicest person everyone's ever met. And that's exactly what makes you absolutely terrifying when you finally snap. Not the kind of snap that looks like screaming or throwing things or losing control on some dramatic, theatrical way that people can dismiss as a moment of weakness. No. I'm talking about the kind of shift that happens so quietly, so completely, that the person standing across from you doesn't even realize the ground has changed beneath their feet until they are already falling. That's you. That's the version of you that most people will never meet because they don't push hard enough. They don't test far enough. They don't press into the places where your patience begins to thin and your gentleness starts to harden into something else entirely. You know what I'm talking about. You felt it before. That strange still moment when the noise around you suddenly drops away and everything goes crystal clear, and some part of you that usually stays buried surfaces with a kind of terrifying composure. It's not anger the way other people experience anger, hot and explosive and burning itself out in moments. It's something colder, more deliberate, more surgical. It's the version of you that sees clearly for the first time in weeks, that understands exactly what's happening and exactly what needs to happen next, and that moves with a precision that surprises even you when you look back on it later. That's the danger. Not the explosion, but the absolute bone-deep certainty that arrives when someone has finally pushed you past the point of return. This week alone has probably given you at least 3 moments where you felt that shift starts to happen, where someone's careless words or deliberate cruelty or casual dismissal of everything you've been carrying finally reached the threshold. Maybe it was a coworker who took credit for something you stayed up until 2 a.m. completing, who smiled at you across the conference table and used your own research to make themselves look brilliant while you sat there feeling the familiar weight of your own silence. Maybe it was a partner or a friend who looked at your exhaustion and called it weakness, who mistook your consideration for a lack of conviction and told you in so many words, or maybe just in that particular tone they use, that you were too soft for the situation at hand. You didn't react. You didn't. Of course you didn't. You never do. You absorbed it the way you've absorbed everything, the way you've trained yourself to absorb pain since you were old enough to understand that making a scene only makes things worse. You took the hit and you kept moving forward, kept your face neutral, kept your voice level, kept your hands from shaking in the way that anyone could notice. And later, maybe in the car or on the way home or in the shower where the water could drown out the sound, you let yourself feel the full weight of what you had held back. You replayed the conversation, finding every moment where you could have spoken up, could have defended yourself, could have let that person see the side of you that you keep carefully hidden. You rehearsed what you should have said, what you would say if it ever happened again, knowing full well that when the moment actually arrives, you will probably hold back again, because that's who you are. But here's the thing about holding back that nobody ever tells you. Every time you absorb a blow that should have knocked you off your feet, every time you swallow words that deserved to be spoken, every time you choose peace when war would have been completely justified, something in you changes. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't dissipate. It doesn't get processed and released the way a therapist might tell you it should. It compresses, it presses down into the deepest parts of you, and it waits. Not with malice, not with the intention of vengeance, but with a simple, patient gravity of water collecting behind a dam that was never designed to hold that much weight of indefinitely. You can feel it right now, if you're honest with yourself, that low hum beneath the surface of everything you do, that pressure behind your sternum that you have been calling anxiety or exhaustion, or just the general stress of being alive in a world that demands too much from people who have too much to give. That's not anxiety, that's not stress. That's the accumulation of every single moment you chose not to fight back. Every person you protected from the full weight of what you were actually feeling. Every situation where you decided that someone else's comfort was more important than your own truth. And it's enormous. It's so much bigger than you have allowed yourself to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that you have been carrying something that was never meant to be carried alone, that was never yours to carry actually. The ocean is calm until it isn't. Good metaphor. That's what people always forget about water, that its stillness is a kind of deception, that the same surface that reflects the sky so peacefully on a summer afternoon has miles of depth beneath it, currents that move with forces we can barely comprehend, darkness that has existed since before any human ever looked at it and called it beautiful. You are exactly like that. The person who smiles and nods and says it's fine when it's absolutely not fine. Who shows up for other people's emergencies while their own life is slowly coming apart at the seams. Who gives comfort and support and understanding to everyone except the one person who actually deserves it. The one who's been running on empty for longer than anyone has noticed. That's you. That's the surface. And beneath that surface, there is something else entirely. Think about how many times you've been told that you are too sensitive, or too emotional, or too difficult, too much, too reactive to things that other people seem to let roll off their backs. Think about the way you've internalized the criticism, that criticism. the way you've learned to hide your feelings behind a mask of pleasantness and accommodation, because showing the full spectrum of what you actually feel has been met with dismissal or mockery, or that special kind of condescension that people reserve for those who feel things more deeply than they do. You've been trained systematically and relentlessly to believe that your depth is a defect, that your capacity to feel is a liability, that your tenderness is a target painted on your back that the world will inevitably shoot at. But here is what they never tell you about tenderness. It takes enormous strength to remain soft in a world that rewards hardness. It takes a kind of courage that most people cannot even imagine, to keep choosing connection, to keep choosing when disconnection would be so much easier, to keep offering vulnerability when vulnerability has been used against you time and time again, to keep believing in the possibility of goodness even when the evidence suggests that goodness is just another word of being taken advantage of. Speech. You've done that. You've done it every single day, probably without even realizing it, probably without giving yourself any credit for the effort it takes to remain open when everything in you wants to close off and protect yourself from further harm. And the people who've told you that your kindness makes you weak, they don't understand what they are looking at. They see the surface, the pleasantness, the accommodation, the willingness to compromise and collaborate and consider other perspectives. They see someone who can be moved, who can be influenced, who can be convinced. They mistake your flexibility for softness and your patience for passivity. They don't see what lives beneath the surface because you've gotten so good at hiding it, so skilled at the performance of placidity. And the people who've known you for years have no idea what happens when you finally decide to stop performing. But you know. You've seen glimpses of it in moments of extreme stress, in situations where the stakes were too high to maintain the mask, in confrontations where your back was against the wall and the only way out was through. You felt that shift happen, that strange and unsettling calm that descends when the decision has been made and there is nothing left to be afraid of. You have watched yourself become someone you barely recognize, someone who speaks you with perfect clarity, who moves with absolute precision, who seems to have access to resource and capabilities that you didn't even know existed. And afterward, when the dust settles and you have returned to your usual self, you have probably had a moment of genuine shock, of genuine disorientation, because that person who emerged in the crisis didn't feel like you. But they were you. They've always been you. You have just been very, very careful about letting anyone else see them. The reason you don't lash out is the same reason a parent doesn't strike their child. Not because they lack the capacity, but because they possess something infinitely more powerful. Self-governance, restraint, the ability to contain force and direct it purposefully instead of letting it spray outward in all directions like a fire hose that's broken free of its handle. There is nothing weak about that. There is nothing passive about choosing not to destroy something simply because you have the power to do so. In fact, it's the opposite of weakness. It's the kind of mastery that few people ever develop, the ability to hold enormous power in reserve and deploy it only when the situation truly warrants it. Only when the cost of restraint exceeds the cost of action. Most people are predictable because they are reactive. Push them and they push back. Insult them and they insult you. Hurt them and they retaliate. It's human. You can chart their responses on a simple graph. Stimulus and response. Cause and effect. Button pushing and button pushing back. These people are easy to manage, easy to manipulate, easy to neutralize because they operate within a narrow band of expected human behavior. But someone like you, someone who absorbs and processes and chooses carefully, you are impossible to predict because your responses come from a place that most people cannot access. You are not following the standard pattern of tit for tat, offense and counter-offense. You are operating on a deeper timeline, a more patient strategy, a longer view of what matters and what doesn't. And that unpredictability, that's what makes people nervous. That's why you get those strange looks sometimes, those slightly uncomfortable silences when you don't react the way everyone expected you to. People sense that there is something beneath the surface that they cannot quite identify, something that feels like a held breath, like a coiled spring, like the moment before thunder when the air itself goes still and heavy with possibility. They don't know what you are capable of because you have never shown them. They don't know what you can do because you've never done it. They only know what you are chosen not to do, what you have chosen not to do. And that's more frightening than any demonstration of power could ever be. Think about the moments in your life where you've been most challenged, most tested, most pushed to the absolute edge of what you can endure. The relationship that broke you open and left you piecing yourself back together in the dark. The professional setback that made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and your path. The family situation that required you to be the adult, the peacemaker, the one who holds it all together while everyone else falls apart around you. In each of those moments, you had a choice. You could have broken. You could have been given in to the despair or the rage or the overwhelming exhaustion that was pressing down on you from every direction. But you didn't. You didn't. You found something in yourself that refused to collapse. Some core of resilience that you didn't even know existed until you needed it. And that resilience, that hard-won capacity to endure and persist and keep moving forward, even when every part of you wanted to stop. That's not a sign of weakness. That's the foundation of everything you are going to become. The world is full of people who have never been tested. They've lived comfortable lives in comfortable circumstances where nothing has ever required them to dig deep and discover what they're actually made of. They float along on the surface of existence, never knowing what depths exists beneath them, never having any reason to find out. And that's fine for them. That's their path. But you've been tested. You've been refined. You have been through fires that would have consumed other people entirely. And you came out the other side not just intact, but stronger, more complete, more yourself than you were before you entered them. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's not something to hide. That's the very thing that makes you dangerous in the most beautiful sense of the word. Because here is what happens when a person like you finally reaches their limit. Best part. They don't explode. They don't lash out. They don't do anything that can be dismissed as just another outburst. Instead, they simply stop pretending. They stop, not pretending, accommodating. They stop carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations and start speaking from a place that has no concern for approval, no need for validation, no interest in maintaining the fiction that everything is fine when it's absolutely not. I want to calm down a little. And when that person speaks, people listen. When that person moves, things change. When that person decides that they are done with a performance or pleasantness, the entire dynamic of the room shifts because everyone in that room has just discovered that the person they thought they knew was actually a carefully maintained illusion. That's a beautiful part, yeah. And you felt that shift happen in other people, haven't you? You have seen what happens when the quiet one finally speaks up. When the gentle one finally says enough. When the person who always yells finally plants their feet and refuses to move. It's disorienting. It changes everything. And that's who you are. That's the person you become when you stop apologizing for your existence and start taking up the space you deserve. Not because you are trying to dominate or intimidate or control anyone, but because you have finally understood that your gentleness, kindness was never the whole story, that your kindness was never your only gift, that beneath the surface of all of that accommodation, there lives something fierce and undeniable and absolutely unwilling to be diminished by any longer. This is what the people who have taken advantage of you don't understand. They think your patience is infinite. They think your willingness to forgive is unlimited. They think your desire for peace means you will accept any terms, any treatment, any level of disregard, because you are too nice to push back. And you've let them believe that. You've let them operate under that assumption because it was easier. Because confrontation was frightening, because you genuinely believed that being agreeable was the same thing as being good. But, thank God, but you've grown past that belief. You have learned that there is nothing good about letting people walk all over you, nothing noble about accepting treatment that you would never inflict on anyone else, nothing holy about setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. The danger of being pushed too far is that you might finally realize how much power you've been holding in reserve. And once you realize that, once you feel what it's like to speak from the full authority of who you actually are, you will never be able to go back to the diminished version of yourself that you've been presenting to the world. You will understand that in a way that cannot be forgotten or unlearned, that your niceness was never a limitation. It was a choice. And choices can be changed. The people who need you to stay small will sense this shift happening in you. They will feel it as an instability in their own lives, as a change in the weather, as the approaching pressure of a storm that hasn't arrived yet, but it's already making its presence known. They will try to push you back into your old patterns, your old complaints, your old willingness to be the one who absorbs all the discomfort too, so everyone else can remain comfortable. And maybe they will succeed for a while. Maybe you will find yourself slipping back into the familiar rhythms of accommodation and avoidance, because they are easier, because they are known, because the alternative feels risky and uncertain. But you will never be able to unsee what you have seen. You will never be able to forget that you have another choice, another gear, another register, another version of yourself that exists beneath the surface, and is waiting for the moment when you finally give it permission to emerge. When that moment comes, it will not look like anger. It will not look like a rage or fury or any of the things that people expect from someone who's finally shaped. It will look like clarity, like certainty, like the kind of absolute conviction that cannot be argued with or negotiated away, because it comes from a place deeper than reason, deeper than emotion, deeper than anything that can be swayed by persuasion for treat. You will speak differently because you will no longer be trying to make yourself understood. You will simply understand yourself fully and completely. And you will let that understanding show in every word you say, every look you give, every boundary you establish and maintain. And at that point, the people around you will have a choice. They can adjust to the new reality, to the full version of who you actually are, or they can remove themselves from your life. There is no third option. No. The person you've been pretending to be is never going to be enough for you anymore, because you've tasted something better, something more real, something that feels like coming home to yourself after a long and exhausting journey. You felt what it's like to be fully alive, fully present, fully yourself. And you are not going to be able to settle for anything less ever again. The tide is already turning. The thing that's been building beneath the surface of your life, the pressure that's been accumulating from every moment of restraint, every swallowed word, every absorbed insult and injury, is reaching its peak. And when it releases, when you finally allow yourself to become who you have always been, but have never quite allowed yourself to be, it's going to be beautiful. Really so beautiful. It's going to be powerful. It's going to change everything about the way you move through the world and the way the world responds to you. Not because you have become someone different, but because you finally stopped pretending that the gentle person everyone sees is all there is. The storm is always there. It's been there your whole life, gathering strength in the deep places where no one else can see, building its force in the silence and stillness that you have cultivated as a protection and a defense. And now it's ready. Now it's time for it to move. Now, not destructively, not cruelly, not in any way that diminishes the essential goodness that's always been at the core of who you are, but powerfully, fully, with a kind of force that reshapes coastlines and redefines what's possible. You've been the nicest person in every room you've ever walked into, and that's made you invisible, dismissible, easy to overlook. But the storm that's coming, the person you are about to become, the full expression of everything you've ever been and everything you've always had the potential to be, that person is going to be impossible to ignore. That person is going to change everything. And that person has always been you.